everyone, Anarch here, and this is another episode of Liberation in Action, which is a series of videos I've been doing where I essentially go over examples from both history and in the modern day of horizontal power structures, where people come together from the bottom up and make decisions together about how the structures they live in will be managed. And the example we're going to be looking at today is something called Cecosesola in Venezuela. However, before I get started, I just want to say, if you appreciate the work that I do on this channel, you should go over to my Patreon and become a patron for any amount. $2, $5, $7, $10, $20, anything you can spare would be enormously helpful. I should also mention that if you become a patron for any of those amounts, you will get access to the Anarch Discord server, where we have a really fantastic community going. We discuss praxis and history and theory and all kinds of other things there. So if that interests you, you should go become a patron for any amount and you'll get access to that server. However, I think it's time we get started. So what is Cecosesola? Well, that's a good question, because before I started doing this series, I actually did not know anything about Cecosesola. Cecosesola is a federation of worker consumer cooperatives in Venezuela. And perhaps what is most notable is that these are all horizontal. Not only are each of the cooperatives horizontal, but the federation of cooperatives is also horizontal. And they're up to around 60 different cooperatives all federated together using this horizontal form of management there in Venezuela. And this name, Cecosesola, actually is an acronym. It stands for Cooperatives of Social Services of Lara State. And that's because these cooperatives were created in Lara State there in Venezuela. Cecosesola has existed for 57 years as of the time of this video. That is to say, they began in 1967. Cecosesola arose originally from a situation where one of the members of one of the cooperatives had someone in their family die, and they were unable to pay for their funeral services. But instead of leaving this cooperative member out to dry, all of the cooperatives in the area came together and they created a cooperative funeral service. And this cooperative funeral service then carried out the funeral arrangements for this cooperative member. And in fact, this funeral service, this cooperative funeral service, still exists to this day. It's one of those 60 cooperatives that are federated together under the Cecosesola Federation. However, when this all began, these cooperatives were much more traditionally hierarchical. They had not yet begun this process of becoming more horizontal and experimenting with worker self-direction. They still had a board of directors. There was still not very much worker or consumer participation in decision making. However, this all really changed in 1982. In 1982, the funeral home manager left, and instead of replacing the funeral home manager with a new manager, they just left the position vacant. Followed by this, the warehouse manager left, and once again, instead of filling the position, they just left it vacant. You might say, well, surely the business went under soon after, but no, not at all. In fact, this was the beginning of their experimentation with horizontal forms of management, wherein the workers came together and rotated positions in order to continue the management of their workplaces. So this brings us to the first topic I want to discuss, and that is organization. How does Cecosesola actually organize itself? Well, the answer is the Federation uses general assemblies, and a lot of them, I should note. In an interview about Cecosesola, the founder of the Federation, Gustavo Salas, says that the Cooperative Federation comes together in many very large meetings where they develop collective criteria that bear on individual decisions. And this is to say, they're not necessarily making like these big binding decisions that have to be carried out by the entire federation. Instead, what they're doing is they're developing these sorts of rules of thumb that people at the individual level can simply carry out, and it will create consistency between all of the other cooperatives. That being said, sometimes they do make decisions at that collective scale, which then do bear down on all of those smaller cooperatives. However, there are a lot of these assemblies. They estimate that they hold about 3,000 of these assemblies every single year, which means technically they're holding like 10 of these every single day. But, of course, it's not as bad as it seems, because this is including all of those assemblies at the local level and the regional level and the departmental level. All of these are being included in that count. Because remember, there are 60 of these cooperatives. It might also interest people to know that they use consensus. And I don't mean just trying to get a unanimous vote. I mean to say that they literally don't even vote. They just have long discussions where they deliberate together and they try to answer all objections. So in that same interview with Gustavo Salas, he notes that the vast majority of all decisions that get made in the cooperatives are actually made at the individual level. However, he notes that crucially, because this is the case, individuals have to take responsibility for the outcomes of those decisions. And you might be asking, well, how do they carry out administrative and managerial tasks, given that this is the case? And the answer is through rotation. So if you've never heard of rotation before, what it means is that people rotate through positions within the workplace or within the organization in order to learn all of those different positions. Someone does not just become manager and stay manager indefinitely, or become like a floor worker and stay a floor worker forever. Instead, people rotate through those positions over the period of time that they work for Cecosesola or their individual cooperative. And you might imagine that this must be a very formal process, but according to them, it's not very formal. It's actually very informal. People rotate through these positions as they have capacity and desire, and they want to be educated. So they don't actually have standard terms for staying in any of those positions either. I note all of this because people might assume when you have this many cooperatives all federated together that you must have some very formal structure for coordinating them. But in fact, it seems like they use a lot of very informal mechanisms in order to make decisions. So next, I feel like it's obvious that we need to talk about the economics. I mean, after all, it is a federation of cooperatives, right? First, I just want to note that Cecosesola has actually survived a variety of economic downturns which destroyed a lot of more traditional firms. And in fact, they've weathered them very successfully. And it should be said right off the bat, they do not pay wages and they do not pay salaries. What they do is they pay advances on projected future revenues. This is generally pretty standardized across all of the cooperatives. However, people that, for example, have families may get paid a slightly larger advance than people who don't have families. You might think that that sounds kind of unconventional and perhaps not practical, but actually it is. They pay more than double the mandated federal minimum wage. And it looks like their net turnover in the course of a year is about $100 million US. They also don't aim for profit maximization. Instead, what they're doing is they're aiming for surplus and reinvestment. Everything they're doing is trying to de-emphasize the profit motive and re-emphasize worker autonomy. Because the workers at Cecosesola are the ones who determine everything, and because their focus is actually in providing good products to the people that are there, this combination of factors actually leads to them heavily de-emphasizing the profit motive in how they manage their firms. Their main focuses are reinvestment into the cooperatives, providing good services to the people, and providing good wages to the workers, which, as we've noted, isn't really a wage, it's what they call an advance. However, I think you know what I mean. Despite the doubts of capitalists who think that the only way to run an economy is through the profit motive and hierarchy, Cecosesola has pretty much only seen growth in this decades-long process. And they estimate they have around 300,000 regular consumers. And they've done all of this not even utilizing government grants. In fact, they really emphasize that they want to maintain their independence as an economic entity. They want to focus on small-scale organic growth that comes from inside the cooperatives, that develops from their relationship with their consumers. And I suppose I should mention, people who regularly consume their product actually become members in the decision-making process. That is to say, they actually become decision makers in the cooperatives themselves. So with this in mind, they are worker-consumer cooperatives, not just worker cooperatives and not just consumer cooperatives. Because you might actually be familiar with some that are just consumer cooperatives, for example, credit unions here in the United States, or just worker cooperatives. I actually find this really interesting because I'd been asking about this concept of worker-consumer cooperatives quite a bit, and I didn't really have any examples previous to reading about Cecosesola, and I'm really inspired by what they're doing on that front. But let's get more specific, because I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, what do these cooperatives do? Like, what services do they offer? And I think this might be one of the most exceptional parts, because they actually offer a lot of services and very successfully. To begin with, they do a lot of agricultural work. In fact, it looks like they produce about 500 tons of vegetables every single week. And it's interesting because the way they price all of these products is by finding the average of all of the vegetables and fruits that they produce, and then assigning that average value to all of those products. And what this does is it sort of protects people from wild fluctuations in price, right? Some things are really expensive and some things are very cheap. But when they do this averaging approach, what it does is it sort of brings prices down more generally for those expensive items. And it allows people to afford a lot of things they may not have been able to afford otherwise. However, they don't only grow food, they also then cook and produce different foodstuffs. These include bread, whole grain pasta, cereals, tomato sauce, herbs, spices, honey, and fruit pulp, among others. All of these foodstuffs and these raw items are then actually taken to markets 3 times a week. And it is estimated that they provide foodstuffs to somewhere around 1/4 of the entire 1 million people in the city that they're in. Because of this approach that I've been laying out here, they actually provide those products at about 30% less than competitor prices. And when you include all of these regular users and people who are workers in the cooperatives and all of that, you're looking at about 20,000 members in these cooperatives. Somewhere around 1,300 of those are actually workers in the cooperatives, and of that 1,300, about 700 of them are working in agricultural production. Also, of course, as was stated before, Cecosesola provides funeral services. However, it was interesting to me because unlike a lot of funeral services abroad, this is not just like, somebody has died and then you go and you purchase funeral services. It's more like funeral insurance. You pay this smaller amount over a long period of time, and then when someone dies, this cooperative is ready to just provide those funeral services for you. And of course, like I said, this is the oldest cooperative in the Federation. However, I think what maybe is the largest achievement of Cecosesola is that they run a very successful health center called the Comprehensive Cooperative Health Center. This health center carries out over 190,000 healthcare treatments every year. And that includes surgery and laboratory procedures and x-rays, and also alternative health treatments such as acupuncture and massage. And the prices for this cooperative hospital are said to be about 60% of the private market that is providing those same services around Cecosesola. So a lot of people utilize this cooperative health center. And as an added benefit for being a member of Cecosesola, and that is to say a regular user or a worker, you actually get a lot of those procedures for free. And with this in mind, they're kind of providing like consistent healthcare insurance to the people that are members of Cecosesola. There is also a cooperative bank, and this bank gives out loans at much lower interest rates than a lot of the other banks in the area, and is associated with a solidarity fund, which the cooperatives themselves can all get together and pull from in order to fund the different actions that they may be in support of. So even though maybe this video is not as long as some of the other examples I've given, I just want to note that this project is extremely successful. I'm sort of shocked how many people talk about Mondragon and not Cecosesola, because from my perspective, Cecosesola is actually a better example of horizontal prefiguration than Mondragon is. Mondragon is actually not on the list because Mondragon's pretty hierarchical, not only in each cooperative, but like in the federation of cooperatives. Cecosesola is a demonstration of effectiveness of horizontal methods, and I think that's extremely valuable. More people should be talking about Cecosesola for that reason. You know, when you were to tell somebody about Cecosesola, you might assume that their main problem is like disorganization or informality or not being able to compete in the market. No, none of those are a problem. In fact, Cecosesola is a very, very effective competitor within the market. Actually, the main struggle that Cecosesola is facing is the Venezuelan government right now. The Venezuelan government used to have regulations which put them on a roughly even playing field with private entities and state actors in society. However, they passed some laws which tax Cecosesola's advance wages as if they were surpluses, and their taxes went through the roof very recently. This is as of 2022. Regardless, Cecosesola has weathered much worse things than this. It's been around since 1967, and I suspect that they're going to survive that problem. I just want to say that Cecosesola is a fantastic example of economic prefiguration. It really pushes us to ask what the limits of cooperatives are. Like, they're still in the market, but they are not fully incentivized by profit seeking. They are not managing things through a wage relation with the workers. And they are largely focused around providing quality services to people rather than degrading the quality of the services in order to make more money. I'm really impressed with how Cecosesola has taken their surpluses and has prioritized reinvestment rather than, raising their advances, for example. I also really like how they have standardized the prices of all of their fruits and vegetables across the board. I think it really helps them weather the radical shifts in the economy that might take place, as they don't have to rely on one or another of these fruits or vegetables to be their main cash cows. I guess the long and short of what I'm saying is, it's a really good example for all of us who are in urban areas and are looking for something to emulate when we create networks of cooperatives. I think it really might emphasize the sorts of principles which would allow us not to be fully taken in by, the profit incentive or, paying ourselves larger and larger wages or, degrading the quality of the goods that cooperatives might offer in order to make higher profits. They have really given us a fantastic model for how to do this form of horizontal cooperative economic prefiguration. So what I'd like to see is more translation of materials into English. Spread the word about Cecosesola and tell more people about what's taking place. And once those materials are translated into English, then we can all hopefully learn from Cecosesola. And obviously, as with previous examples, I will be including links down below in the description. And I hope you go read through those and watch some of those videos because I found them very, very interesting. But anyway, I think that's about it for this video. I just want to say here as we come to the end that if you appreciate the work that I'm doing on this channel, please go become a patron at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/anarch for any amount, $2, $5, $7, $10, $20. Any of those amounts will get you access to the Anarch Discord server, where we have a really great community being formed. We discuss praxis and history and theory and all kinds of other things. So if that interests you, you should go become a patron at my Patreon. Anyway, I think that is about it for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed. I have been really intrigued by a lot of the things that I've been learning since I've begun researching for this series, and I hope you agree. In any occasion, I'll see y'all later.